If discussing about films, books, poetry, etc. is something that you enjoy, then do consider becoming an abstract member. You will find all the necessary links in our description below. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. We are finally putting out content more regularly, and we would love to show you what kind of discussions we have. What you're about to watch is our conversation on the book The Trial by Franz Kafka. The Trial is a fascinating piece of existential literature from the 20th century. Our discussion revolved around understanding Franz Kafka as a person and how the way he led his life led to him writing the kind of books that he wrote. We also had a discussion on the metamorphosis, which will release soon. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Hello guys, welcome to the Abstract Room. My name is Sankalp. Here we are discussing our book of the month for July. I'm very glad that I picked up this book thanks to Savni, who had recommended this book to us in the beginning of the month. We have read Kafka's Metamorphosis just a few months ago. So I think it's a good way to sort of understand the person entirely by doing two books of theirs within the span of few months. काफी कुछ जानने मिलता है, समझने मिलता है about the person, especially a person like Kafka who wrote a lot about himself in a way in his stories. So I think अपना intention भी आज वही रहेगा. During the discussion, we'll try to talk about Kafka, about the book, about what we understood, what we did not understand, and the intention is to have a free, willing, open conversation. Unlike him, who was not free, we are very free, very much free, at least for now. So anybody who like recently finished the book?
I have multiple things, first impressions of this. So firstly, for me, Kafka is like a bad nightmare of some sort. Like all of his themes are like just those kind of nightmares you get just before waking up. Na kuch absurd hota hai, and you wake up out of it. It is just like that. मतलब मेरे को भी लगता है उसको सपना है वो लिख दिया बस और पब्लिश कर दिया बस. And specific to the trial, मेरे को बहुत ज्यादा crime and punishment vibes आए इससे. It's like crime and punishment, but in reverse. उधर उसको बहुत परवाह है, but the system doesn't care about him until the end. Either it's exactly reverse. इसको परवाह नहीं है, but the system is hell-bent on prosecuting him. So it's like a flipped version of crime and punishment. That was my first impression of it.
So I had never read Kafka up till now. And the only starting point I had was I had heard about this term Kafkaesque in multiple, I had read about it, or the first, in fact, like introduction to this term Kafkaesque was via Breaking Bad. One of the episodes is named Kafkaesque. And that is when I started searching what it really means. And then when I got a chance to read this book, the only thing I have, a one-word description of the book is it's frustrating. I think that was intended, and much like his life, I feel that the book itself is sort of a version of his life. I found it like frustrating. Also, I could sort of compare it with George Orwell's 1984. So in that, although there's no trial or as such, the protagonists are aware that they are being watched. Whatever they are doing is being seen by this big brother. Here, the protagonist doesn't know at all what he's done. There's just some random thing that happened. He's being arrested for it. But it gives me a vibe of a totalitarian regime. I don't know why, but I sort of felt that it was that way based on the first hearing that takes place and some of the lines in the book. I could feel that he was probably pointing towards something of that sort. I might be wrong, but yeah, that's the vibe I got.
Yeah, I think that similar dystopian vibe. Like when I was reading the book, I got a lot of the Truman Show vibes. Like everyone's watching, like a similar thing that you said. Because I personally, till the last moment, felt that everybody was already planned and staged and kept. Because everybody knew about his case. That random guy he met at the advocate's house block, he also knew about it. Like anybody on the street he's meeting, not exactly like that, but like he met the painter, usko hi pata hai pehle se, everybody already knows. Like, I think a lot of people, like even his uncle knew about it already. I just felt everything was staged, and they were trying to make a fool out of him, or just like everybody in the world was involved to do that, like a very Truman Show sort of a thing. So yeah, I completely agree to that when you say that. The reason I was saying this book has, and so this is translated by this person called Idris Parry. They have tried to basically write a small intro about Kafka's life and how it's related to this particular book. So there's this part they write about. So basically, I never actually knew that the trial is actually a reproduction of not just his disillusionment with his own life, his job, and everything, but also with love. And it came out of a failed love story, or sort of feeling at love again and again, or not being able to completely love. Felice, I think was her name. So like I'll just read this one paragraph. Uh, so this is basic context के लिए. This is when he sort of हार मान के बोलते ठीक है चलो शादी शादी कर ही लेते हैं, ऐसा कुछ था. Like they were actually in love, but now their families were involved, so he's like शादी करना ही पड़ेगा. So he was sort of दब गया था वो. It's about that. At Whitsun, Kafka was again in Berlin, this time with his father for the official ceremony of engagement. On 6 June, he made an entry in his diary, which shows how close he was to that transposition of mind into art, which is the trial. Back from Berlin, like now I'm quoting him, back from Berlin, was tied hand and foot like a criminal. Had they sat me down in a corner, bound in real chains, placed policemen in front of me, and let me look on simply like that, it could not have been worse. And that was my engagement. Everybody made an effort to bring me to life, and when they couldn't, to put up with me as I was. Shop quote. The ritual, the relatives, the witnesses, uh, were they testifying against him, seemed to close around him like a cage designed to keep him from the conditions necessary for writing. Basically, सबने उसको घेर लिया एक तरीके से ताकि वो लिख ना पाए. So I mean that is how he was thinking about marriage as well.
I think I enjoyed the trial a lot more than I did the metamorphosis. And I think one of the reasons for that is that the trial somehow feels a lot closer to home. And like you can like एक बहुत literal sense में ले तो you can see those bureaucratic inefficiencies, वो सारी लाल फीता शाही art play around you as well. While like both the books are equally like dreadful in a sense, but the metamorphosis still feels like something that can be looked at in a way that is a little bit detached. The trial somehow feels a lot more personal, and I think it was a lot like मतलब थोड़ा broad था as compared to the metamorphosis, right? It was longer. The story had more meat to it. So in general, reading it was a much more enjoyable experience as compared to the metamorphosis. So I think that was the major thought that I had while reading it. I expected it to be a little bit dense because like matlab ऐसे books you do expect them to be slightly harder reads, right? But it wasn't as hard as I'd expected it to be. And yeah, the ending was pretty weird. I still don't know how to feel about that.
I had tried reading Metamorphosis, and I remember that Metamorphosis had a very weird sense of existentialism into it. But the trial genuinely felt like thoda plot hai bhai zindagi mein, but it's like an actual description of midlife crisis. मतलब दोनों ही books ऐसी हैं कि the person is having midlife crisis, and at one point we all start saying कि यार चल रही है life. इसमें he's like yeah I'm going towards death. Like in both these books ऐसे लगता है कि yeah I'm just going towards death. And I think I read more about this book, and this book is like उसके ना chapters थोड़े से jumbled up हैं because after he had died, this book was published by one of his friends. So these chapters he didn't know the order also. कभी उसने कुछ लिखा है कभी कुछ लिखा है. So that's why I think एक मुझे वो लगा कि confusing थी, but it felt like you were just going towards the end of it.
Like because you're talking about it already, what is the ending according to you? Matlab, if you had to sort of interpret something out of it and make sense of that one phrase, like a dog, and it was as if the shame would outlive him. Like this is the last line of the book. What do you make of it? Like anything that comes to your head when you think about that line, what does it mean to you?
So I think like a dog's life, he doesn't really have a say with it. Like he doesn't decide to be a pet. He doesn't decide to be a street dog. similarly, I think Kafka felt like, he doesn't have a say in his life. Whatever he's doing, he's just, bound by bureaucracy or maybe his work, where he did not really put in a lot of work with his time. But then he got this Italian friend and he didn't show up. Then he got a priest. So he was not understanding what his say in his life is. The characters are just coming in, telling him something to do, and he's like, okay, ठीक है, ये कर लेते, चलो फिर ये कर लेते. So it's like when he died and when the knife thing happened, so he said like a dog because he genuinely felt helpless because he didn't have a say in it. That was my interpretation.
Firstly, I think ये जो पूरा the trial है, it was not just limited to courtrooms. In fact, the entire trial was a public trial. It was about the public perception कि ये बंदा का केस चल रहा है, तो let us talk something about him. So it was all about the public perception, and the ending, like a dog out of shame, it was the outcome of the entire public trial, just whatever his perception was among the entire population.
I felt like a dog would probably point to how street dogs are considered a nuisance. So I think when I read about Kafka's life, I read that he had a lot of self-doubt, shame around his existence, and stuff like that. So probably when he says like a dog, the way he died, and that the shame will outlive him, he was kind of referring to himself. It resonated with his life that whatever he wrote or whatever he did was not good enough. People would always make fun of him. Like even in one of the courtroom chapters that when the actual hearing takes place, there's a particular incident where we see that the people are laughing at whatever K has to say. The judge is at placed at a higher pedestal. So I could relate it with his life. Like if you consider the judge to be his father, he's looking down upon Kafka, and the world is laughing. So the audience or whoever the people in the court are, they are the world that's just laughing at whatever Kafka has to say or do. So I think that's where the shame will outlive me comes from, the sense of guilt or self-doubt that the character takes with him throughout the book and right up to the end.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense, because I think I remember that scene when he was at the advocate's place, was trying to say, I'm not going to seek any more help from you. So the block character, that guy was there this time pe. I remember that scene very vividly because it was articulated very intensely. That was not something I had seen throughout the story. It was a very high tension scene where he was this block guy was asked to be on all his fours and then sort of was trying to plead with the advocate. And I think there was a description, I'm paraphrasing, something around that. After a point, because your trial has gone on for so long, after a point, you are completely relied on your advocate and what they say. So you become a dog. And the way Block was living also in the house, if you remember, he was living in this small little maid's quarters, I think. And the way he was supposed to always focus on reading and claustrophobic environment, and he, like, when the advocate asked the girl over there as well about how he was behaving, and bola ki, he was there inside the entire day. I just gave him one glass of water once, and he came out for eating food for at 8 o'clock, and then he went back again. Like the entire way it has been described, it looks like you are telling about a pet, about a dog you are trying to control or keep it, in a certain place. This reaction also is desperation, and it also showed a class struggle at that point. That K is so high up the order in that sense that K क्या है, और सारे जो लोग हैं उनके क्या हाल हो रखे हैं उस टाइम पे. So I think it reflected that as well. But I think it sort of also leads to this one one line that was there just before the last chapter. End is the name of the last chapter, right? Just before that, there's a line when he's just leaving the cathedral. The priest says, "The court asks nothing of you. It receives you when you come, and it releases you when you go." It again talks about the indifference of the court, and like it's supposed to be unbiased, but here it's indifferent. So there's a slight difference over there, because who are you, like, is the court there to serve you, or are you there to serve the court? Matlab, that's what Kafkaesque basically means also, right? The disillusionment that a person has with his apparent reality, and because of the systems that are created, कि आप सिस्टम को परपेचुएट करने में हेल्प कर रहे हो, और सिस्टम तो आपके लिए है ही नहीं. So in the initial few pages when they come in to arrest him, so there's this entire conversation where he's talking and asking like, am I really under arrest and all of that. So there's this part where it says, I definitely don't mean to say you should despair. No, why should you? You are only under arrest, that's all. That was one part, and uske aage there was another part which says, you have misunderstood me. It's true that you are under arrest, but that doesn't mean you can't follow your occupation and you won't be hampered in your normal way of life. So K says, being arrested does not sound so bad. So, I mean, like, what do you think the word arrest meant over here? And matlab, what was the system all about? Like, what was the case about, according to you? Like, why was he under arrest, according to you? Yes, Sailesh, please.
I have an additional question to layer on top of this. I don't have an answer for this, but just when the scene which you described was happening, उसका arresting officer, एक arresting officer का नाम था Franz, and हमारा main character का नाम it's Joseph K. And for K, I'll take the creative liberty to assume K is Kafka. ठीक है? So does it mean कि both of them, the arresting officer and the main character, is supposed to represent Kafka himself, and this entire thing is something which relates to his internal struggle or something like that?
Actually, I was thinking about something that was sort of on similar lines. Though throughout the story, at least to me, it seems as if Joseph K is a character who feels as if he's sure about himself. मतलब जो metamorphosis में बंदा था वो दिख रहा था कि he's resigned himself to his circumstances completely. And चाहे कुछ हद तक मतलब वो एक resilience वाली बात है, but it's still largely कि he's given up on stuff. Joseph K, or it feels like he wants to get through with things. He still believes in himself till the very end. And फिर भी क्या मिलता है उसको? For the lack of a better word, कुत्ते की मीठी. So in a sense, I feel as if the trial was another thought experiment in Kafka's mind, in the sense that even if he's feeling as if he's completely powerless in his life, he feels that even if he had some sort of power, even if he had the strength to go on, the consequences would not have been different. He's holding both the systems that are present around him and himself accountable for how shitty he feels about himself throughout. Because देखो, like, it's very obviously it's a commentary on like how everyone had been unfair to Kafka during his life, right? But if we think about the things that Sailesh just pointed out, that like Joseph K and Franz was one of those arresting officers, we could maybe sort of think about how ultimately Kafka was the person who was holding himself back. So it ultimately ties into the fact that Kafka was very, very, very depressed. But I think that is something that's interesting to think about.
You know, there was this part, I think it felt as if throughout his story, he sort of felt as if a spectator to his own life. So I think by having Franz as a different character and K as a different character, sort of also showed his detachment from his own self. Like, I am making this up, okay? I don't know if that's the case. I'm making this up ताकि कुछ meaning निकाल सके. But like Kafka would be like, bro, रहने दे ना फालतू, हर बात का meaning. But who knows. Like if we have to make a meaning out of it, this is, I think, would make some sense.
Yeah. Like honestly, sometimes I feel like I think people weren't like supposed to read whatever he had written in the first place. But honestly, it feels like he just had a bad day. He wrote down why he was feeling shitty और वो लिख के भूल गया. And फिर फालतू में सबने इसका इतना ज़्यादा deep analysis करना चालू कर दिया.
हो सकता है हो सकता है I don't know, हो सकता है because I think as I said ना this came out of जब उसको शादी करने के लिए force किया गया था. So I mean he just wrote it in his diary. The trial ka idea came because he was being forced to marry. So I mean we can never really say the exact reason. Like again, whenever I was going through this video essay which I had shared in the playlist as well, where it said that one of the interpretations is about the Kafkaesque का जो हम actually meaning समझते हैं, his disillusionment with system and everything. But as many there are writers, उतने interpretation है इसके. मतलब जितने लोग पढ़ रहे हैं उतने interpretation है इसके. So there's no one because he has never actually had an interview done of himself, for example, where he has expressed what he really meant. So you can never really know, I think.
Yeah, it literally could have been just one bad day rather than some life-changing event. Like, yeah.
I mean, who knows?
Who knows?
So, like you mentioned, it's based on personal interpretations. Even I had this thought that maybe he just wrote it simply, there's just no meaning to it absolutely. And we are trying to interpret it in really deep ways because it just somehow became popular. But I just feel like, arrested doesn't really have to mean arrested in the true sense of the word. अगर उसको हम थोड़ा अलग वे में सोचे, so arrested can also mean that आपको जकड़ा हुआ है किसी तरह के rules में, the way society expects you to behave. There's this particular path they want you to follow. So you deviate, you do something, you try to do something different. They'll come up with some sort of rules or whatever that आप ये सही नहीं कर रहे हो, ऐसा थोड़ी होता है, ये गलत है. So that I feel is what would be an interpretation of K being arrested. Throughout the book we see that trying to talk him into submitting some documents that prove that he is innocent. That can be interpreted as you're trying to explain your choices to the people around you. बाकी सब भेड़ चाल में चल रहे हैं, but you're trying to do something differently. You have to explain yourself, even if you've not done anything wrong. But just because people don't understand it, you have to explain yourself. Documents आप भेजोगे कोर्ट में, maybe वो पढ़ेगा, कोई नहीं पढ़ेगा. That's what they say in the book. The first set of documents है, it will be thrown away probably. Nobody will read it. Nobody knows what's in the document. But still, you have to keep pacifying the society or keep pacifying the judges. आप अपने references लाओ and try to influence them to see that what you're doing is right. So I mean I think that is my interpretation of him being arrested for no possible crime.
I mean, I think sort of all of us forgot about the fact that there was a trial even taking place throughout the story. Like which further drives home the point of the story. Like the focus was never even on the trial throughout. मतलब Kafka सच बोल गया काफी ज़्यादा ऐसा लग रहा है.
There was just one hearing in the entire book.
Yeah, like एकदम शुरू वाली ना.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's not really in jail, he's arrested, but he doesn't spend even one single minute in jail.
I think it was an hallucination of Joseph कि वो कुछ crime है, but people are looking at him, उसको ऐसा लग रहा था कि उसने कुछ crime किया है, जबकि actually उसने कुछ crime किया नहीं था, but people were just interrogating him for no reason at all because that's what people do.
I think it was the arrest sort of was more internal in that sense. Like it was a way to make him implode than explode. The physical jail would sort of not make him really feel guilty that way, how he would feel guilty while imploding, while knowing that he's under arrest, but he is not, like always being with that sense of anticipation. So I think that sort of degradation of a human in that sense is what made him what I don't know. Like, I don't know if he was in a different position in his life, would he have had the same reaction he did? Like, it's a rhetorical question. Then I was reading it, मुझे ध्यान में आया कि इतने अच्छे बैंक पोजीशन में है, शायद अकेले रहता है, फैमिली का पता नहीं है क्या नहीं है. That's another question I want to ask वैसे. But like, there's so much things that are happening. मतलब so little is happening. मतलब in terms of his personal life, but he's in a very good position professionally. Do you think he would have his reaction to his arrest would have been any different if he was in a different position in his life? Like, if you could speculate that, आपको मतलब why did Kafka specifically choose a character who is professionally successful? Like, because that's not him, because that's not Kafka himself.
I think that he was again like he was just completely trying to prove this point over and over again. Ki at the end of the day, everyone's helpless. Ki like it's only the amount of mental effort and how much you will prioritize that particular problem in your life, but that problem is going to remain and it is going to eat away at you. Let us imagine that K wasn't a person who was this successful. He had lots of other problems in his life that were matlab, actual tangible problems, not creations that were his own. Then it would have just been another problem in his list. अच्छा 36 दिक्कतें हैं, घर पे खाना पानी दाल नहीं है, एक केस चल गया, चलो क्या बात है, एक और दिक्कत है. But just because it was a problem in his relatively problem-free life, it assumed all the more importance for him.
I don't particularly think कि Joseph was at a मतलब a particularly well-off stage in his life. मतलब जो उसका description लगा, I think it was pretty mediocre or average. It was not too extravagant and not too poor or something. And interesting thing is that जो भी उसके life में description है, we get it through the words of Joseph himself. ऐसा मतलब कुछ additional description नहीं है. It's all about his actions, his interactions with all of his colleagues and people at his residence. जो भी वो कहाँ पे रहता है, वो गुरुबाग के घर पे रहता है ना, वो something.
Paying his time.
हाँ. तो he doesn't have a place of his own. He lives in a sort of a dormitory with other people, and he works at a bank where he also has superiors to report to and has someone under him. So in my opinion, Joseph ka like career is like somewhere flat in between, not too successful, not too shabby.
Yeah, so like Hemang said, agar character poorer hota, so he would have had a lot of other problems to worry about. Similarly, I feel like agar wo और अच्छे position पे होता, तो भी he would have very little to worry about. He would have had certain resources or acquaintances in higher places to convince the judges of his innocence. But we also see in the book that he is kind of jealous when the deputy gets to talk to the Italian client, and he wants to climb up the ladder. So that shows ambition. And when you have ambition that you want to like you said, he was supposed to get a little more stable economically. That is when you worry most about your reputation.
So I had another question to ask about why don't we know anything about his childhood or his family? मतलब, was it consciously avoided in writing about the character? Would it have added more depth into the character if he knew about it? या फिर वो जरूरी था भी कि नहीं था उसके बारे में जानना? His background, his studies, or just his relationship with his family. Would that have helped you understand the character better, or was it unnecessary?
I think Joseph was a very, very bare bones character. Like, only the things which were relevant to the trial of sorts were put in that. Like, when it comes to his family, the only family member is his uncle, जो mentioned है. That too only to lead to the वो बुढ़ा lawyer, advocate जो है. And the more profound question is, जब उसका trial का reason ही पता नहीं है, तो what will he do with his family information?
Well, no, because I think because you also mentioned about Crime and Punishment initially, I was sort of relating to how much we know about Raskolnikov's character, like who was for others, he was a protagonist of Crime and Punishment. How much we knew about his family and how much it mattered in that story. Would it have helped in any ways if he knew about him, about K's story?
No, I don't think so. Like, I feel that either Joseph character was supposed to sort of resonate with everyone. Like, if we were to put ourselves in Joseph's shoes, then we should be easily able to sort of feel everything that he's experiencing. कि ऐसा randomly उठा लिया, ये सब कर रहे हैं, public prosecution हो रहा है. So if we have a family background, it makes it harder for us to put ourselves in his shoes.
I mean, he felt like a very rational, a very practical character also because of his job description of being a banker and everything. So why like he was also aware about this, कि मतलब, I am the rational person. मैं ऐसे फालतू चीजों में पड़ता नहीं हूँ. शुरू में दिखा रहे हैं also that he likes to address situations in the most gentlemanly manner possible, for example. Then why do you think at so many points throughout the story, even before, like there's a point when we realize he also started taking his case seriously, now he's trying to understand the case more, he's trying to do things वगैरह वगैरह, painter के पास जा रहा है, ये कर रहा है, वो कर रहा है. That's a different part of the story. That's a transition that happens. But transition के पहले भी, when he himself is telling himself कि I'm not taking the case seriously, he's telling everybody else also I'm not taking the case seriously, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है, कुछ भी हो, क्या फर्क पड़ता है. Then why is he always trying to justify his actions to so many strangers also, not just people around him? For example, even somebody he sort of knows, his neighbor, Fraulein Bernstein, whatever the name was of the actress, I think, was living next door. Her, or even when he decides to go all the way to that desolated place where this trial is going to take place, then he gives this elaborate speech over there as well. मेरी गलती क्यों नहीं है? He's trying to win over those people as well. Why is he doing all of that if he thinks all of it is pointless? Whom is he trying to justify? Why does he want anybody's validation is what I'm asking. Why is he asking Pauline Brewster, जो उसकी पड़ोसन थी, उसको बार-बार, why don't you trust me? मैंने कुछ नहीं किया है.
I think अगर वो Brewster वाला जो point consider करे, उसने शुरू में like he made an advance on her right at the very start of the book, right? So I think that might have something to do with it. Like he does not want to completely lose the trust of a potential romantic interest. But अगर हम उस बात को भी side पर रखें, this might be a very cliched interpretation of such texts, but I think it ultimately, again, as far as Joseph K is concerned, it kind of boils down to how much in control he feels about a particular situation. Like when he delegated his case to the advocate, वो केस कुछ हद तक उसके हाथ से बाहर हो जाता है. And that's when we see him start to panic. Whenever somebody is trying to encroach upon something that he does not think deserves the amount of attention that it is getting, he starts to slightly panic. And because he feels that he's losing control of the situation that he is in. And पहले जब technically maybe he was in a slightly worse situation as far as the case is concerned, कि like वो hearings वगैरह पे जा रहा था, it was more serious, it was more intense. He was feeling a lot less anxious. So like there's a sort of an inverse relation between how much control he has over the case and how grounded he feels in reality.
And also it also explains that both in this story and in Metamorphosis, one recurring element is that both the characters are very hopeful, or if not hopeful, at least very not giving up attitude wale characters दोनों. मतलब throughout the story till the last point, they are trying to find a solution. They are trying to make things better for themselves, even though they know the system, even though they are feeling helpless, even though they are feeling कि इसका कोई मतलब नहीं है, pointless है ये, but they're still trying to find a solution, or they are very proactive towards that. And I think that was another reason why I think he felt like telling everybody in the world. And होता है ना एक मतलब this unyielding quest for validation, answers, and मतलब it's sort of that thing कि आपके पीछे किसी ने कुछ लगा दिया है, मतलब से कुछ की मतलब वो स्टिकी नोट लगा दिया है, आपको दिख नहीं रहा है बट सबको दिख रहा है, पर वो अरे क्या है बताना मेरे को, क्या है बताना मेरे को, मतलब it's I think a very similar. It just came to my head. I'm not sure I made the right example, the right example, but just that it's something that's stuck with you. A tag has been given to you. It's everybody who's aware about it except for you, maybe. And or like maybe you think everybody already knows and they have already judged you, and you want to influence their judgment कि no 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 ऐसा नहीं है यार, मैं बताता हूँ मतलब ऐसा नहीं हुआ था. But maybe they already don't know only, and you are trying to tell them the entire story. But another aspect of his story, and because there are a lot of these characters that just came and went, and I'm not, because generally we're expected whenever especially when we write for screen, for films also, if you're introducing a character, it should lead to something. It should either help the story, or it should help the character, or it should uh, cause any conflict to the character. यहाँ पे कुछ कैरेक्टर ऐसे भी थे जो पता नहीं उनका रेलेवेंस क्या था. फॉर एग्जाम्पल द न्यू नेबर हु हैड कम इन, जो आई थी साथ में रहने के लिए, या फिर जो एक और सेलर था जो के वहां पे रहता था, जो आई थिंक उसका भाई या कुछ था ऑफ द ओनर ऑफ दैट लैंड लेडी का. There are many such characters, but my point is specifically to do with all the women in the story. My question is the way these female characters are written in the story, do they feel, I mean, do they feel well fleshed out in some sense to you? And
This might be a very, very Freudian take on this, and I'll explain the reason for that. But I think most of the, especially the sexual tension that we saw across all of the female characters in relation to Joseph K, was more of an expression of Kafka's own frustration with respect to how his sister had treated him. If I remember correctly, कुछ ऐसा scene था ना कि like his sister was sympathetic towards him, but she wasn't as sympathetic as he would have liked her to be. So it's always like that satisfaction of being in a system that's that's like that's fulfilling is always a little bit out of reach. Matlab he gets involved with Brunster for a little while. He tries to win her affection back. That amounts to nothing. He gets involved with the advocate's assistant, but turns out that she's like that with every person who comes to him. So and even with the landlady, like he has this like almost like sort of love-hate relationship with her. Of course, it feels a lot more like that of a maternal figure or something. But
even the लड़की जो थी ना वहाँ पे ट्रायल जहाँ पे हो रहा होता है उसका,
हाँ वो washerwoman, हाँ
yeah,
exactly. So and like she's taken away. So it's like he's putting bits and pieces of the relationship that he had with his sister all across the story and quoting them in a way that clearly represents his psychosexual issues. So matlab, like that is what I could make out for his representation of women in the story.
And also the way gender politics worked back then. And I also feel the way the females have been written has a lot to do with the self indulgence of Kafka, कि वो कितना खुद में कंज्यूम था कि वो औरतों को एक तरीके से देख पाता था. उससे बियॉन्ड वो उनका पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू देखने का उसके अंदर कैपेसिटी ही नहीं था. उसके अंदर वो इतना खुद के अंदर दबा हुआ था वो. सो मे बी उसका अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ विमेन इज ऑल्सो लिमिटेड एज अ पर्सन. उसका बिकॉज वो खुद के एक्सपीरियंस से इतना दबा हुआ है, उसने अपने अलग किसी के बारे में सोचा ही नहीं कभी भी. So maybe he doesn't know what it is to be a woman, what it means to have inhibitions as a woman. So he has written women in the most elementary manner possible. I personally felt that because even the relationship he had with Felice, उसकी जो girlfriend slash wife I think बाद में बनती है, was similar to that only. कि इतना insecure था उसके साथ में हमेशा वो, and he never asked her how she was doing in a way. मतलब she was his muse, and he always sort of was just expressing his love and using her love and the complex relationship with her to drive his or fuel his writing.
So I don't have much to talk about the Berstner character or the landlady, but I have some thoughts on the Lenny character, the one at the lawyer's place. So initially, I think she tries to make an advance on Kafka, and he's pretty happy about it or whatever. And the second time when he visits, Mr. Block is also present, and when he sees that she also gives him attention, there was a hint of jealousy I felt. So I felt like as long as Lenny was concentrating on him, he was fine. But just when he gets a hint that she's like this with every client of the lawyers, probably, uh, he doesn't give her that much importance. The point where she asks him whether I should go and give the lawyer his dinner. He is kind of, he hurriedly tries to send her away when he wants to talk to Block about his case, when he feels that Block would be able to provide him some details. So the woman in this case, I felt, is important to him as long as she is dedicated to him or serves some purpose. I wouldn't say it was completely sexist in the true sense of the word, but like you said, the times were different then. So I think once he felt that this Block character is more important and he would be able to help him better than Lenny would, she just vanishes out of the scene, out of the book, and there's just no further mention because she doesn't serve any purpose then.
I want to talk about one more thing about the writing itself of the story. We have talked enough about the complicated structure of the writing as well, but how do you, like, I personally like to visualize a lot whenever I'm reading. I'm sure most of us do. Uh, how were you visualizing the city of Berlin? How do you see K as a person? Like, if you had to like tell me how he looked according to you, was he good looking or not? For example, like, you can maybe take an example of some celebrity, maybe, if you want to explain कि ये इसके जैसा दिखता हो maybe. And also, like, how did you see Berlin as a city? How did you see his house? How did you see the court proceedings के वो घर वगैरह and the everything? मतलब, could you explain what did you see when you were reading the book?
So this has happened to me for the first time, probably, that when I read a book, I did not imagine a face really. This was just a person, a frame, and I don't know why, but now that you asked the question, I realize I only imagined that I'm looking at this person uh, always when his back is towards me. I don't know why, but uh, I mean, I didn't realize it until you asked this to me. Also, I feel like the place where he lives, I imagined it to be a sort of a a claustrophobic environment. He has this just one room to himself. The city, maybe I didn't really, I don't have too many thoughts on the city as such. But yeah, I mean, I imagine his office to be a pretty regular government office, uh, stacks of paper lying here and there. Again, I imagined a claustrophobic environment. And also I imagined him always wearing black. A hat maybe, a tall, lanky person. He has just no personality at all.
And that's such a nicely firstly explained by you, and also very smart from Kafka as well, like not giving any description in that sense.
हाँ,
बचपन के बारे में नहीं बताया तो और नहीं पता इसके बारे में. Very similar to his contemporary Albert Camus. उसकी एक बुक है द स्ट्रेंजर जो हमने डिस्कस किया ऑलमोस्ट एक साल पहले एब्स्ट्रैक्ट में. So, like, you can imagine the same character here, ठीक है? Even though यहाँ पे he feels a sense of guilt, he's more emotive here. वहाँ तो पूरा ही खाली है वो बंदा. And मतलब the book का नाम ही द स्ट्रेंजर है, ठीक है? तो उसमें भी वही, you can't imagine a face. Like, it's impossible to imagine a face.
Yeah, I really did not imagine his face as well, but it was like the facial structure was relatively what Kafka's facial structure was like. मतलब थोड़ा सा boxy सा squarey सा, like very Steve Carell types.
So just one small point. I also imagined the entire, proceedings or like whatever the film that goes on in my head in black and white. There was just no color. No, I mean, it just the drab, gloomy nature. कोई hope ही नहीं है life में. ऐसा, imagination था. You could imagine probably a movie from the 50s or 60s, but with minus the
हाँ.
happiness. Yeah.
Like a very Hitchcockian,
Yeah.
I think, for me. Yeah.
I think I was talking about like how I imagined the characters by themselves. Also, another like slightly interesting thing was कि I imagined the character of Block as a block. Like मतलब वो आदमी मुझे चौरस दिख रहा था. एक लंबे elongated dice जैसा दिख रहा था मुझे. I'm not even kidding. Like he looked so out of place in the entire atmosphere in the वो गिड़गिड़ाने वाले scene में, but he somehow still did not feel unnatural in that context. Like he just felt grotesque, and that scene was a grotesque one, so it just tied in perfectly with all of that. And this was also something that was interesting to me. A lot of the like a lot of ways that I imagined areas and places to be in the metamorphosis was the same way that I imagined them to be in the trial. So, for example, जो उसका कमरा था, वो मेरे को बार बार सोचना पड़ रहा था कि नहीं, ट्रायल मेटामॉर्फोसिस में वो डिफरेंटली डिस्क्राइब था, ट्रायल में डिफरेंटली डिस्क्राइब था. लाइक आई हैड टू कॉन्शियसली ड्रॉ द डिस्टिंक्शन अगेन एंड अगेन. नहीं तो आई वाज इमेजिनिंग इट इन द सेम मैनर. एंड फॉर सम रीजन एवरीथिंग वाज like all the rooms and all the architecture, everything was either oak or mahogany. Like पता नहीं क्यों, पर सारा का एक wooden texture था और वो थोड़ा brownish के shades में था. Like मतलब it was lavish, but it did not but it was lavish, but it felt unkept. That's the way that I can describe it.
Right. I personally, I don't know. Like, I loved the way you guys described K, but like if I have to talk about the surroundings, I felt like it was always uh, either raining or it was about to rain. It was the गंदी मुंबई वाली गर्मी होती है ना, जो एकदम मतलब ऐसे बस बारिश हुई है, होने वाली है कि जस्ट पहले रहती है कि मतलब बारिश हो भी नहीं रही है साला, लेकिन गर्मी लग रही है, पसीना भी आ रहा है. I felt very sweaty, like the entire thing, very sweaty. Like I don't have any other word to explain, because whenever he was moving in those जहाँ पे उसका ट्रायल हुआ था शुरू में, वो पूरा एरिया, even the place where the painter was living, and for some reason even the advocate's house seemed very dark. Like बहुत अंधेरा है वहाँ पे, ऐसा लग रहा है. I felt like it was a huge room and everything, but बहुत अंधेरा लग रहा था मेरे को. So like every place just felt so gloomy, but his office felt very white. Like everything felt very white. Like everything was white. Like people wearing white clothes. I felt the walls were white. The glasses obviously white, transparent, and like everything felt very white. I didn't see a lot of black, but a lot of gray and a lot of brown throughout the story.
Yeah. So I had a question, like since you're describing characters, is there any, did any one of you feel there was a specific reason that the advocate was bedridden? Like, does it show, like Sankalp mentioned, the indifference of law, or does it show a certain helplessness that the advocate is bedridden? Because I mean, to me, it really didn't take the story forward in any way, but it was just one characteristic of this person.
I liked the way you interpreted it, in the way that it felt like the way the system was crippled but still had so much power, or so many people. I think, I'm not sure if it was meant in that way. It maybe just Kafka wanted to add more character in the character. But personally, like, yeah, like him being a manifestation of the system which exists for its own self and to perpetuate itself, and not for anything else or to serve anybody else or help anybody else, uh, felt like the advocate as well. The advocate was a very wise person, and he's a very smart person with his words, and uh, like the way he treated uh, Block as well. It showed that he was very sure of his power, especially over these helpless people, these desperate people. That I am not here to help them exactly. मैं अपने मजे के लिए हूँ. Like this sort of, like, if he had to explain how the system worked or who the system was, he was the system. Everybody after a point became like, it wasn't like everybody after a point became so dependent on the advocate that you sort of started to serve the advocate like a dog.
Like you mentioned the crippled system, so I just like found one small reference that when the first hearing takes place, we see that the judge has just this one notebook on his desk. So that was my
Yeah.
interpretation. Like you are a judge, you just have this one small notebook. It makes you feel like it's a kangaroo court. There's just no specific procedure or a defined law. It's just whatever the judge according to the judge's whims and fancies. That's what happens in court.
His disability sort of just makes us feel as if this entire legal system and this administration is inaccessible. मतलब क्योंकि अगर तुमने पहले दिखा दिया कि वो किसी तरह से out of reach है क्योंकि वो crippled है, that will make people a little bit more apprehensive about approaching him in the first place. तो उसको approach करना अपने आप में फिर इतना बड़ा task लगेगा, and of course then following up and ultimately becoming subservient to said system या person को अपने आप में गलत चीज़ है. So like that just illustrates that how aloof the system actually is from the people that it at least seeks to maybe serve.
So I liked Hemang's point of view that you feel a little wary about approaching the system because it maybe scares you. It is helpless, but nevertheless it scares you. So there's this one line in the book which really hit me. I think it will ring true for the future as well. That defense is not really allowed under the law. It's only tolerated. This was such a beautiful line. I think I didn't really admire the beauty of Kafka's writing until I just came across this line. And I think it kind of relates to the advocate and his situation as well. That, it's just tolerated. And Kafka tries to, take his help to further his case, but then eventually realizes that probably he is the best advocate for himself.
There was this one point also, where he's been asked to just acknowledge his guilt or accept his guilt. So I think it also reflects how Kafka tells that any sort of action or proactive thing that we try to do in order to tell people or tell the system that we are not guilty, that we are innocent, is a futile act, because the entire system is anyways pointless, senseless. So आपका ये act भी futile है. And interestingly, the word senseless and pointless is used so many times in the entire story, especially senseless. बहुत बार use हुआ है in different contexts, but मैंने notice किया बहुत बार senseless word use हुआ है. I just like the use of the word senseless again and again. एक और part था where I don't remember exactly. I just marked it, so I'm just telling this. So this was basically with the context of why nobody questions the system at all. So यहाँ पे लिखा था, the only right thing to do was to come to terms with the circumstances as they were, even if it were possible to rectify certain details, but that was just a senseless delusion. The best one could hope for would be to achieve something for the benefit of future cases, but that would be at the expense of doing oneself immeasurable harm through attracting the particular attention of a bureaucracy which was always vengeful. Just never attract attention. One had to keep quiet even when this went against the grain, and try to see that this great legal organism, which was always in a state of equilibrium, so to speak, and that anyone who independently made an alteration in his own area would be cutting the ground from under his feet and could come crashing down, while the great organism itself compensated for the slight disturbance by easily producing a replacement at another point. Everything was after all connected and remained unchanged, assuming it did not become, and this was probable, even more secretive, even more observant, even more severe, even more malevolent. Yes. I think this is my favorite part of the entire story, because this entire thing does not just tell us about the justice system. It tells us about the government. It tells us about how so many organizations work, about how so many systems of the world work, that कोई point नहीं है तुम्हारा question करने का. Like, I'll give an example. Has anybody watched Patal Lok by any chance? So this is not a spoiler exactly, but Patal Lok में एक point last में आता है, Keerti, you might also remember, वेयर जो अपना मेन कैरेक्टर है उसका बॉस बोलता है कि हमें जो ये लगता है ना कि ये पूरा जो सिस्टम है पुलिस का और ये गवर्नमेंट का जो इतना कॉम्प्लिकेटेड है, इतना मेस्ड अप है, इतना फक्ड अप है, या ये है वो है, कचरा है, पूरा दलदल है पॉलिटिक्स, बट तुम्हें ये गलत बात है, क्योंकि दिस इज ऑल अ वेरी वेल ऑयल्ड मशीनरी। उसमें ऐसे लाइन बोला था उसमें कि ये सब बहुत बड़ा सिस्टम है जो प्लान्ड है, इट्स अ वेरी वेल ऑयल्ड मशीनरी, एंड यहाँ पे आप अपना एक रोल अदा कर रहे हो। आपको नहीं करना है, आपको धक्का मार के निकाल दिया जाएगा या आपको कचुम्बर बना दिया जाएगा और कोई उस जगह पे और कोई अपॉइंटमेंट कर दिया जाएगा। ये सिस्टम चलता रहेगा, ये सिस्टम चलता रहेगा, सिस्टम इज स्टिल गोइंग टू एग्जिस्ट। आई लव दैट पार्ट ओवर देयर, एंड वो था इसी चीज का फिल्म वाला वर्जन जो यहाँ पे एक्सप्लेन किया है कि तुम if you do any independent action to try to change anything or dissent, कोई point नहीं है उसका, because system will find a way to आपको दबा के रखने का, ताकि वो खुद perpetuate हो जाए, और and then you become, if you try to be more than a cog in the wheel, then आपको wheel से निकाल देंगे और किसी और को वहाँ पे plant कर देंगे. So I mean I love this part a lot, because this was much more than the story itself. It was the theme. It was what Kafkaesque really meant. Did you find the story funny or amusing at any point? Like, were there any parts that made you chuckle, like in an absurd way also? But कुछ था जो आपको fun लगा, because बहुत ही grim story है, right?
I think when the preacher end में कौन आता है जो उसको law समझाता है?
हाँ, priest, हाँ.
Priest, when he says this one line that no one does not have to believe everything is true, one only has to believe it is necessary, I realized he is just making fun of like every person who was coming in, they were making fun of his situation, what he is at the moment. So I think the priest explaining made me like, acha tum bhi aa jao chalo.
There was just only one small part which I found funny, that when the two policemen were being beaten in K's office. First of all, it was absurd because why would they get beaten in his bank or whatever? But I don't know why, but I imagined those two to be like really fat policemen, and they were getting hit on the ass by the one who's punishing them. I just don't know. I found it like really funny, some sort of a there was this, I don't know if you would remember, but टॉम एंड जेरी में एक एपिसोड है जिसमें टॉम आई थिंक जेरी का जो नेफ्यू होता है उसको बहुत मारता है, and I kind of imagined that situation to be sort of similar to what was happening to the two policemen. I found it like it was good what was happening to them, and then Kafka tries to K tries to bribe this person कि इनको छोड़ दो, कि मेरी वजह से मार पड़े. So I found that part a little funny, not extremely funny, but yeah, it was like,
absurd.
Yeah.
There were 2-3 moments, like I asked this question also because मुझे भी ध्यान में आया था इस जगह पे. तो शुरू में जब उसको अरेस्ट करने के लिए आए होते हैं, तो वहाँ पे वो लोग खाना भी खा रहे होते हैं, फिर रिमेम्बर ब्रेड जैम खा रहे हैं, बटर लगा रहे हैं, सब कर रहे हैं. तो एक पार्ट था, इट जस्ट वियर्ड बिकॉज एट दैट पॉइंट के इज फीलिंग सो, मतलब को पता नहीं मैं क्या पूछूं, क्या अरेस्ट मतलब क्या, एंड दे आर ईटिंग ब्रेड जैम वहाँ पे. तो एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग पार्ट था कि यू आर अंडर अरेस्ट आफ्टर ऑल, but how can I be under arrest? And above all, in this way, now you're beginning again, said the warder, and he dipped his bread and butter in the honey jar. And like again फिर से आगे झगड़ा कर रहा है, अरे कैसे ऐसे, मतलब कुछ भी ऐसे, and फिर से एक लाइन लिखी है about जैम में उसने फिर से डुबोया. तो मतलब कैसे मिक्स किया उसने ये पूरा पैराग्राफ काफका ने, कि वो ब्रेड जैम खा रहा है और यहाँ पे झगड़ा कर रहा है, सवाल कर रहा है उससे, यार ये मतलब क्या ऐसे कैसे अरेस्ट कर लिया, मतलब. So it just felt amusing in that way. There was this one part where so K is talking to, what he's talking to, but he's talking to, and वहाँ पे उससे बात हो रही है about superstitions, about how because it is so complicated to understand the actual systems, and because the hierarchy is so unlimited in that sense, कि जो सबसे नीचे वाले लोग हैं उन्होंने खुद के सुपरस्टिशन बना लिए, because उनको जो actual system है वो पता नहीं है. तो वहाँ एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग बात लिखी थी यहाँ पे. You must remember that in this business, many things are constantly coming up for discussion which are beyond the range of the intellect. People are just too tired and distracted to cope up with a lot of things, and so take refuge in superstition. I am talking about the others, but I myself am no better. One of the superstitions, for instance, is that according to many people, the outcome of a case can be seen in the accused man's face and particularly in the line of his lips. And these people said that judging by your lips, you are sure to be convicted and soon. मतलब
जैसे शेरनी के आंख में देख के बता सकते हैं कि वो मैन ईटर है या नहीं.
exactly,
That's the same.
exactly. But yeah, anything you guys felt we haven't talked about yet? Any last thoughts you have about the book? Why? How would you, if you had to sell this book to somebody, like as कि ये पढ़ो, so what would you tell them, and would you actually tell them or not?
I think अगर हम Indian audiences की बात करें ना, like especially like Desi audiences in general, South Asian audiences, they wouldn't find this book absurd at all. I think European audiences या फिर places where you'd expect systems of governance या फिर like systems in general to be a little bit more efficient, a little bit more humane, उन लोगों को ये पढ़ के शायद एकदम वो भौचके रह जाए कि अच्छा ये सब क्या हो रहा है. But to us, it still feels like something that's normal. This does not feel very odd, very detached from reality, या something that requires a huge shift in our perception in any way. हम पढ़ते हैं, हम कहते हैं हाँ ऐसा ही तो है, इसमें क्या गलत लिखा है काफका भाई, सब सही तो लिखा है. Because like this is how things are for us. So I think those things did not feel very amusing or funny in that regard, is क्योंकि well पता ही यही है, मतलब ये कहाँ डार्क है, ये तो जिंदगी है.